First thing I'm going to do is open a photo in Photoshop. So here's a photograph that has something in it that we kind of want to get rid of. Okay? So what would that be? What is the distraction in this photo? Chris? Big spot. Okay? So what we want to do in order to get to that spot, there are a couple, like in Photoshop, like we've talked about many times, there are many ways to do the same thing. I'm going to show you two ways to remove imperfections like this. So one of the first things you need to know is in order to make your picture bigger or smaller, there are controls on the keyboard. The way Photoshop was meant to work is your left hand is on the keyboard, your right hand is on the mouse. You do control stroke, you do keystrokes with your keyboard on the left hand, and you move your cursor around with your right hand. So for the left hand, we can do Control plus or Control minus to make the image bigger or smaller. When we do that, we're making the image itself, the view of it, bigger, but not the image itself, just what it looks like. Okay? So that allows us to get close to one thing. Control minus or Control plus. Control minus makes it smaller, Control plus makes it bigger. So you notice now that it fills up the whole frame, and I want to move it over to get to that spot. Once I've done this, I can hold the space bar down, and you'll see that my cursor turns into a hand. When it turns into a hand, it's called the moving tool now. It allows me to move things around. Okay? When you see a hand, that's always a moving thing. So it allows me to move this picture around so I can get to the spot that I want to fix. So that's, again, the space bar. Hold it down, and then you can move. When you hold it down, the cursor turns into a hand, and it allows you to move things around to get to the spot that you want to fix. So we can see right now we want to get rid of that big whatever that is in the picture. Okay? So in order to do that, I'm going to show you first how to use the clone stamp. And the clone stamp is about halfway down on the tool palette. Whoops, let me move the tool palette over so you can see it over there. You see the tool palette? It's about halfway down, and it looks exactly like a rubber stamp. If you hover over it, it says Clone Stamp Tool, and it looks just like a rubber stamp. The function of that is it takes pixels from one area and moves them over into another area. So it copies pixels from one area and puts them over on another area. So it kind of, like if you think of a clone stamp stamping over something, it actually covers it up. Okay? So in this case, I want to take pixels from this area, which is the concrete, and I want to cover up this, because I want to block that. I want to make it match the concrete, right? Because this is it. This is really distracting. It's at the edge of the photo, and my eye goes right to that. So when I click on the clone stamp tool, you'll see that I have a big circle here. That is called a brush. Any of the Photoshop tools that has a brush will show you when a circle comes up. It means that that tool itself is a brush. And the brush has some components to it. It has edges, and it can change sizes. It has a few things, but we're going to talk about that today. The hardness or softness of the brush for the edges, and the size of it. In order to make the brush bigger or smaller, we use the bracket keys on the computer. Those are right under your backspace on your computer. Look at your keyboard right now and see where those bracket keys are. Under the backspace on your computer. Left bracket makes it smaller, right bracket makes it bigger. Left bracket makes it smaller, right bracket makes it bigger. Okay? You can also go over here. Once a tool appears that has a brush, if you come into the little tool menu here, or brush menu, you'll see that you can change the size up here or the hardness of your brush. But what's really frustrating about doing it this way is that I have to, every time I move the size, I have to come over and check and see if it's the correct size of what I want to do. Whereas if you use the bracket keys, you can see exactly the brush change sizes in front of you. Okay, left bracket key makes it smaller, right bracket key makes it bigger. So I want to make this just a little bit close to, not quite the whole size of this, but because I don't want to do it all at once. When we clone, we usually want to kind of do it in parts. So I'm going to make it a little bit smaller here. Now, the edge of this brush, I do not want it to be hard. If I do it hard, it's going to show the edges of where I clone it. So I want it on soft. So I'm going to take that slider and move it all the way over to the softest it can be. because then the edges will tend to blend in more. Okay? So I want to take pixels from this area here, and I want to stamp them over this area to get rid of this big gray blob. Okay? I do that by holding the Alt key down, and you'll see now that my cursor turns into a target. Okay, I'm going to do it over here just to show you the difference so you can see it in a light area. See how it turns into a target? That means it's going to take the pixels from that area and move them over to somewhere else. But I want to take them from here, so I hold the Alt key down and I left mouse click in that area. Then I come over to the area I want to clone over, and I hold my left mouse key down and I just kind of cover it like this. Okay? You'll notice as I do that it's hard to see because it's gray in there, but you'll see that over on the right side is a little plus. That little plus shows you where it's taking the information from. Okay? So if you look at here, as I hold this down, you can see, let me see if I can get that in a lighter area. I'll put it here so you can see. So it's showing you, the little plus shows you where it's taking the information from, and you see how it cloned over this and made it horrible? So we're going to undo that. And then we have, so now we have this big blob out. So in order to make the whole image smaller again so I can see what it did, that looks a lot better without that gray thing in it, doesn't it? So if I come back to my history and I come over and I open it, I can see that before and after in there. Oops, not that. Okay? So now we see that that looks a lot better. So I'm going to do Control plus again to get closer to that. Hold the Shift key, hold the space bar down to move over. And I want to take out this little stick here. I also think that's distracting. So in order to take that little stick out, I want to use this little tool that's called a lasso tool. These tools, this is the third one down on your tool palette. And that third one down on your tool palette has a few different selection tools. These are what we call selection tools. So if I just select anything like this and I draw a circle around it, and then it turns into what we call marching ants. These little dotted lines here that look like they're moving are called marching ants. That's how we know a selection is made when you see the marching ants. That means that that area is selected. To deselect something, Control D. Write that down because you're going to need to do that sometimes. Nothing else works except Control D. So if I draw a selection and it's in the wrong spot, I do Control D to deselect it. Control D for deselecting. But it allows me to select a specific area and do something only to that area in Photoshop. That's the beauty of a selection, is once something is selected, it allows you to work only in that area. So right now I'm going to come around and I'm going to select this stick that's sitting on the concrete, because to me that's distracting in the photo too. So I'm going to come over and I'm going to left mouse click, hold it down, and you just kind of draw with it. You always, though, in order to make a selection, have to end and start at the same point, because otherwise it doesn't complete the marching ants. So you have to start at one spot and end at one spot, and that's what creates the marching ants and the selection. Okay? Once that area is selected, I'm going to right click inside of it and go to Fill. This is called Content Aware Fill. This is only available on the last two versions of Photoshop, and that's a really cool thing that we can use. So I'm going to click that, and then this is on most of the Photoshops that you guys are using, the default will be Content Aware, but there are other things here that you might have to click on Content Aware. And just keep everything else the same, the blending mode the same, and then say OK. And then what happens is you see that it filled in that area. Okay, let me go back and show you again. Okay? Watch it fill in that area. I'm going to go Fill, and I'm going to say OK, and it fills that in. It takes all of the information around the outside and it says, oh, this is what you want to do. You want to fill that in with that background and get rid of that little thing there. What gets away my marching ants? How do I deselect it? Control D, okay? Now I'm going to do Control minus to make it smaller, and now I see that I got rid of both of those distracting elements in the side of that picture, right? So if we come back to where we started, here, and then to where we ended up, we got rid of both of those things, which makes the picture a whole lot better, right? Now, one more thing we might want to do to this picture is we might want to lighten up just inside the flower. The flower is kind of dark. Everything else looks about perfect, but inside the flower is a bit dark. So I'm going to show you now the dodging and burning tools. So those are down here. One looks like a lollipop and one looks like a hand. The dodging and burning tools, because those are the tools that are used in the darkroom to create dodging and burning. So if we click on here, so the dodging tool lightens a selected area and the burning tool darkens a selected area. The key here is it lightens or darkens selected areas. Right now, if I did brightness and made this whole picture brighter to get the flower brighter, this is all going to be overexposed or too light. So we want to lighten or darken selected areas. That's what dodging and burning does. Dodging lightens selected areas, burning darkens selected areas. And that's because we use our hand in the darkroom to burn stuff, and we use a tool that looks kind of like a lollipop, a stick with a little disc on the end of it, and that's what we use for dodging in the darkroom. So I'm going to select the dodge tool, and you notice again it's a circle, which means what? It's a brush. Okay, so I want to brush the middle of this flower and make it lighter. But when you'll see when I have it selected, I also have different options up at the top. The exposure option, first of all, it'll start at 100%. That's going to be the default. But if I go in and I do that, then it's too obvious. So I don't want to do that. I usually dodge and burn between 10 and 15%. So I'm going to come somewhere down there on that exposure tool, because you want to kind of build it up. Then you have the option of dodging or burning the shadow areas, the midtones, or the highlights. Right now, what's inside here is the shadow areas. So I want to lighten those up, so I'm going to click on shadows. Then I just hold, once those are selected and I have the dodging tool selected, I just hold my left mouse down and I come in and I just keep brushing it around, just like you would a real brush, and I'm lightening up the middle of that flower. So if you look at the difference between where we started here and where we end up is here, it's a lot better and a lot brighter, right? But this little area in the very middle is light, so it's called the highlight area. So if I come in and I click on the highlight area, I have the ability to lighten up that spot. So let's make this bigger and show you that. So I can come in, oops, click the wrong key, sorry. So we're going to come in and I'm going to dodge the light area in the middle. So you can see that I have it on highlights selected, so I'm going to hold this down and just kind of paint over this area, and you see that it gets a lot brighter in there in the middle of that flower. I can come out on the outside if I wanted and lighten up all those too, because those are also highlights. And so that's the difference here in what I did in the picture. Okay? It allows you to selectively darken or lighten specific areas of your picture. That's the dodging and burning. But what you want to watch out for is exactly what happened here, which is you see here that this got this little halo effect. We don't want that little halo effect there. We don't want that little halo effect there. So we would try to get rid of that when we're doing it so that doesn't show up that way. But the picture looks a lot better, right? So that's the dodging and burning. It's lightening or darkening specific selected areas in your picture. Okay? To get rid of things, we use the clone stamp or the content aware fill. Now I'm going to show you something else with the clone stamp here. So you can also come over here and select this whole flower. Hold the Alt key down. Remember to select what your target, and I can just click and move this all the way over here. Or whatever. Okay, now if I come in and I want to show you the difference here, if I select a hard edge on the brush, show you the difference of what happens when we do that. So I'm going to click on the edge, select this, hold the Alt key down, and come over, and you'll see now that we have a hard edge all the way around the edges of this flower here. You see how it doesn't blend? Sometimes you need that when you're doing this stuff, and sometimes you don't. So you want to be very careful of that. But if you try to do this to get rid of something